Shalom, shalom. First of all, I want to give all praises on it is due to Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Kakdash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, following this truth from a hood well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000 and the rest of the 1/3, the large multitude. Unto you I say shalom. Coming to you back with another lesson through the Spirit. And I'm entitled this one, Civil War is Coming. And not just civil war, but also race wars, martial law, all hell breaking loose from all the turmoil that's going on around here in America. Because it's evident that these so-called Americans are divided against themselves. Especially these so-called white people, these Edomites that are either right-wing or left-wing, pro-Trump or anti-Trump or whatever it may be. Really, these Edomites, these so-called white people, they're the ones who are the most divided. Because, they, as a collective, they hate, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, which are the true Israelites. But even amongst themselves, these so-called white people, they're divided. Just like in these countries, you got Russia, you got the European countries, you got the United States. Even though they agree in certain things, ultimately they're still divided. And what that's leading to is, for here in America, it's going to get to the point where these so-called white people, these Edomites, are just going to revolt. They're already fed up. Their country is collapsing. Their economy is failing. Their last hope was really Donald Trump, to so-called make America great again. But ultimately, that was all bullshit. He just sold them a dream. And now that these MAGAs, these MAGA supporters got fooled into thinking that Donald Trump was going to make everything great again, ultimately it was all bullshit. And now they're mad. They're fed up. They're looking for a solution. They want another leader to fix America, but America's not going to be healed. It's on a decline. It's circling a drain, and it's not going to be healed. And that's something that these so-called white people, these Edomites, can't accept. So it's going to get to the point where they're just going to revolt. They're just going to say, "Fuck it. We're gonna take our country back. We're going to revolt against the government." Sedition. They're not going to regard their, like it says in the second Ezra, they're not going to regard their kings, their politicians, their mayors, the police. They're just not going to give a damn. They're like, okay, shit, if these so-called leaders of this country aren't doing shit for America, then that's what these red-blooded Edomites are going to do. They're like, fuck it, we're going to take matter into our own hands. And that's when it's just going to be all hell breaking loose. And it's not just going to be civil wars. It's going to be race wars. You're going to have so-called white people against each other. You're going to have white people against Jake. White people against so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. You're going to have Arabs and Chinese national, all these different races that are going to fight against each other. But ultimately it's all Yahweh Bashem Yahushai's will. This is Matthew chapter 10 and verse 34. Think not that I come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. And this is in the red letter. This is Yahweh Shai speaking, who everybody ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Because you got these American Christians, these other Israelite camps, they love to claim that who they ignorantly call Jesus Christ is coming to give out hugs and lollipops, and he's coming to bring world peace, to the entire earth. No, that's all bullshit. Yahweh Shai, ultimately, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, he's putting that spirit of division, not just here in America, but throughout the four corners of the earth. Because before this kingdom falls, the kingdom of Esau, Edom, the self-proclaimed white man, it's going to be all hell breaking loose. And it's clear and evident that the Lord is stirring things up. He got the Charlie guy that, got put to death on live. That made these Edomites mad. And now it's to the point where they're like, shit, we got to do something. They took our one of our leaders away. They almost took out Trump a year ago. So it's to the point where these Edomites are fed up, and that's ultimately the Lord stirring things up upon the earth, because Yahweh Shemel Shai is not with the peace. No, like it says, the Lord is a man of war, and that's what's going to happen. There's going to be war, civil war, race war. There's not going to be no peace, because you got all these Americans that, we need peace, we need to stop the fighting, but that's all bullshit. Ultimately, these Edomites, they're thirsty for blood. They're ready for it. Especially these red-blooded Edomites, these patriots, they so-called love their country. This is Matthew chapter 12 and verse 25. And Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And that's what's happening. This kingdom, of Esau, Edom, these houses, these cities, because ultimately, when civil war really kicks off, it's gonna be these red states versus these blue states, these democratic cities versus these Republican cities, just like in that movie Civil War, and when the reporters got pulled over, they got stopped by those red-blooded Edomites. They asked them, like, well, what kind of American are you? Are you this kind of American, or are you that kind of American? So in that day, it's not going to matter, if you're an American citizen. It's going to matter, what do you believe in? Do you believe in this country? Are you a liberal? And these Edomites already put Jake in that liberal spot. So these Edomites are ready to start putting Jake to death. They're ready to start putting these so-called liberals, these weirdos, these LGQ, plus alphabet agenda people, these feminists, and all these weirdos that America has breeded through the Babylonian wine, the American philosophies, the image of the beast. So very soon it's just going to be all hell breaking loose, because these Edomites, they're fed up. They're fed up with the government. They're fed up with Jake. You got the black fatigue. Verse 26, and if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? So, ultimately going into the physical counterpart of the spiritual demon Satan, which is a so-called white man, which is Esau, Edom. It's clear and evident that even this devil at the higher ups, the wicked elite, they're even divided, of what they want to do, but ultimately they all agree on the NWO plan to get everybody micro C hipped up, but yet they're still disagreeing on some things. And it's the same thing here in America. All these Edomites, they're disagreeing with their government. They're disagreeing with what Trump is doing, collapsing the economy, the tariffs, all these different laws and policies he's passing. This is Isaiah chapter 19 and verse 2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And that's what's about to happen. And that spirit is being stirred up, here in spiritual Egypt, which is America, Babylon the Great. It's evident these Egyptians, these Babylonians, here in America, so-called Americans, they're ready to start putting each other to death, just like in the Purge. He had an Edomite a couple of days ago say that, we need a year-long purge to start, because these Edomites, they're ready to start putting their neighbors to death. They're ready to start putting Jake to death. They're ready to go after their politicians and CEOs and even their work supervisors and managers, because they see that this economy, this place is collapsing. So they got to let all that anger out somehow. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 15 and verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein. So destruction to the world. And who's currently ruling this world right now will be the so-called white man. This is his kingdom, and it's collapsing. Before it collapses, you're going to have all these different civil wars. You're going to have, World War III. You're going to have race wars. But this is all leading up to the collapse of this current kingdom being ran by the so-called white man. And we're looking forward to it because we know when this devil comes down with that great wrath and, he's out of here. Because he's already on borrowed time. But ultimately, Yahweh Shai is in control of all things. And he's stirring up these devils, putting that spirit of sedition in the air. So these devils can just, start, just rioting and looting, to show their true Edomite nature, their true Edomite spirit, which is just to kill and destroy. Verse 15, for the sword and the destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. And that's what's happening. What's the modern day sword? Is the gun. And shit, in America, you got, I think, 10 guns for every person. Especially here in Texas, these people are ready to just do a number on each other. Especially on Jake. That's who they're looking forward to start putting to death is Jake. The so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. You're gonna have blacks versus so-called blacks versus so-called whites. You're gonna have Asians versus Arabians. You're gonna have all different types of race wars. And it's not gonna be no hands, no punches. It's gonna be bullets flying. Verse 16. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So when it's all said and done, these people aren't going to care about, the government, about the police. In that day, the police ain't going to be answering no 911 calls. No, they're going to be protecting their own families. So all these women out here that are comfortable and chilling, relying on the government to protect them, relying on that invisible shield, that's going to be done away with. And that's when majority of these modern day women, these hoes, these thoughts, these feminists, these weak ass effeminate Jakes, these weak ass effeminate Americans, they're gonna suffer a horrific judgment. Because these Babylonians, they're comfortable as all hell. They're not expecting a civil war. They're not expecting for all hell to break loose. In their mind, they're like, nah, that's not gonna happen. Yeah, the spirit of civil war, all hell breaking loose is in the air, but yet these people can't see it because they've been blinded by Yahweh Shai. So it's gonna hit them like a thief in the night. They're not gonna care what these governors and these mayors say to stop putting each other to death. No, they're gonna do whatever is in their spirit to do, which is to go after these governors, go after these mayors, go after these CEOs, these executives, go through their neighbors, door to door, taking the resources, because there's going to be a famine in that day. The trucks aren't going to be moving. These grocery stores are going to be wiped out. There's not going to be any food in the grocery stores. There's not going to be any water. So people are going to be in that spirit of looting and rioting. Verse 17, a man shall desire to go into the city and shall not be able to. And that's right. People aren't going to be able to move freely like they are right now. You can go to another state. You go to another country freely, driving your car and hop in there. There's going to be military checkpoints. There's going to be 15-minute cities. You're going to have to take that micro CHIP. And if you don't have it, you won't be able to access those cities. And that's ultimately what majority of these Babylonians are going to do. They're gonna bow the knee because it's going to be so bad that they're going to be like, shit, I can't get into the city unless I have a micro CHIP. And that's what they're going to do. Verse 18, for because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and a man shall be afraid. And ultimately, this is why this is going to happen, because these prideful ass Americans, these prideful ass Babylonians, they've gotten so comfortable and accustomed to just chilling and no war, no nothing. That's why Yahweh Shai is going to do a great number here in America, because of the pride of these people. Here the economy is collapsing and all hell's breaking loose, but yet these people are prideful as all hell. Their mindset is, okay, we're just going through a roller coaster. We're coming down the road, but we're about to, no, this is it. America will not be healed. like it says in Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 7, these men are going to have their hands on their loins like a woman in travail. Verse 19, and a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. So that's what's going to happen. There's not going to be any food in the grocery store. There's not going to be any food in these, these storehouses, these distribution centers. There's not going to be any trucks being moved. The crops are already drying up. There's not going to be any water. People are going to be through out here. And that's when people are really going to start rioting and start putting each other to death when they don't have any food. They haven't eaten in 12 hours because these Americans, they're so used to eating all the damn time. So it's going to be nothing for them to go after their neighbor, to go after their goods and their their groceries, whatever they have. Verse 61, or not kind of, I'll read 19 again. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. So that's what's going to happen. They're going to go from door to door with a gun, saying, give me your shit. And they're not even going to ask. They're just going to take it. They're going to put each other to death. They're going to take their wives for booty, for spoils. They're going to, off their children. This is what's happened. This was what America has coming is great tribulation for all the pride that goes down here in America. But that's pretty much the point. I pray this is edifying to the elect. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who have learned this truth from Elder well. Peace and salutations to the 150,000, the rest of the 1/3, the large multitude. Unto you I say shalom.